We're going to go on to Sal in Ohio. Pronouns are they, them. Wants to talk about willingness to question self and a personal story and being wrong. Sal, you're on with Johnny and Jmike. How's it going? Oops. I think we got it.
Hello. Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you doing?
Pretty good, thanks. Well, I just, I think, just because of the relevance, and actually was just listening to what Johnny was saying about coronavirus and how that's going to affect people's faith and skepticism and being willing to question whether you might be wrong or that your own perceptions may be wrong. I think that's kind of like ties in pretty well to what I was wanting to talk about because and this was kind of triggered by like a recent experience I had with talking with my parents because both of my parents are anti-vax, conservative, and
lucky you.
Yeah, and so and I've been accused by them of being that I have too much pride and not wanting to question myself, but I got really fired up by that. I was like, really? Like, you don't really know me because I consider myself one of the most self-doubting persons. And I view that as a strength actually. And I think that's something that is maybe a differentiating factor between what makes an atheist and what makes a theist, perhaps. I mean, not always, but I think that's a critical factor. And I was just going to tell a little bit about like my background, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Cause so, I mean, I was raised in a Christian family. Obviously I told you my parents are conservative, Christians. And, by the time I was 13 or so, I was definitely like, I don't believe in the whole Christianity thing. It doesn't make sense to me. And I think I came to like a deist position at that point. And I still consider myself agnostic in terms of, I don't know, cause who knows what is out there beyond the universe. Right. But, so I consider myself atheist now, but I had an experience in my young adult life. I was around 22 or so, 23, where I would call it a religious experience, because I had it was not drug related. It was trauma related. I was in a really difficult position, and I had an experience where I felt like Jesus came to me, and it was all like the truth, the light, the love, and it felt real to me, and I remember I texted all my family like, I have Jesus now, but that only lasted about 6 months to a year, where it kind of slowly faded away, where I was like, I can't make sense of this anymore. If I want to be this generic about what Jesus means to me, it doesn't, make sense to have it be contained within just the Christian, scaffolding. And so now I'm atheist again, right? It didn't last very long, but I just wanted to make the point that the willingness to doubt your own perceptions and stuff is very important. I think hopefully, coronavirus might teach people that they can't necessarily trust what their own personal experience is around them, because, they're just one data point, right? And
right.
But I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. I don't want to take too long, but I just thought it was relevant.
Yeah. Well, so what's kind of like your main your main issue that you'd want to talk about with that said, though?
I think that it's just that it's a real paradigm shift that I think a lot of people are struggling with right now, and it's very apparent with people who just aren't willing to question whether they might be wrong. I mean, even I question, you know, like with my dad, he'll send me a whole bunch of stuff about ivermectin and, you know, conspiracy theories, if you want to call it that. And I do my, you know, I listen and I'm like, well, you know, it's maybe true that there might be some evidence suggesting that there's some efficacy, but it's still not enough evidence for me, you know, to, you know, and I'm like, I totally agree that, you know, sure, we should have some funding for people to do further investigations and further research on, because it's like we need all the tools in the toolbox. But just because that may be true doesn't rule out that this other tool, the vaccine, doesn't work, because you have to, you know, it's like to say that you're anti-vax, you got to understand that.
I mean, the data, I mean, it's pretty conclusive. I mean, you just show your dad the data, like the data which he's purporting to you to say we should do more studies and things like that, just in conjunction with what is happening, right? The demonstrable data, like that, his claims won't stand on any legs. That's
not how it works, right?
I'm not saying you're going to convince them, but I mean, I wouldn't even give them. My point is, I wouldn't give them any bone. I guess maybe I'm interpreting it wrong, but it sounds like you're almost enabling in a way to be like, yeah, well, maybe. The way that I handle these things, if I talk to people and they throw that hint of conspiracy in there, is I just challenge them. I go, how do you know? How exactly did you determine that, right? And challenge them on it, because 9 out of 10 times they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. It's just something they're parroting that they heard down the line that someone else parroted.
Yes, your father, unless your father is a medical researcher, your father got that information doing toilet research or heard it through his squad of similar-minded people who have bought in
and I'm
to
not
something
either. So I mean,
sure.
I'm just saying with your dad, it's harder, obviously, to just be like, you know, to shun, obviously. But with people who, I guess maybe this is why I don't have, like, I have a select few of friends in my real life, is because when people bring these things up at work or things like that, I am the first person to like really challenge them on it, given that they're willing to talk about it. I'm not going to force someone in a conversation they don't want to be in. And that seems to always be successful in the idea that they're not going to bring that up, or they're going to think twice before they bring up an idea that they just pull it out of their ass, because there's actually someone in the room that's going to challenge them and see whether or not it's a substantive case. And 9 out of 10 times, at least what it seems like to me, you'll get them thinking in their own head. The second they go, well, I don't know if I want to say this to Mike because he's going to bring up this whole science thing, right? And like, I don't want to deal with that whole thing. Then they're going to like, that's going to be planted in their head. And hopefully they recognize, well, okay, well, why does Mike look to the science thing as like this, always this kind of, objection to what I say? Oh, because it actually demonstrates things as opposed to not demonstrating things, right? And so for me, I feel like, you know, if you enable somebody very quickly, if you like, it's one thing to say, look, I don't know, and let me look into it. But if you do know and you smell bullshit, even if you haven't researched it, just ask them. How did you determine that? How do you know that?
Yeah, and that's the Jmike way of doing it, Sal.
Yeah,
there's lots of ways to skin that cat,
for sure.
Metaphorically.
Let me like an example of kind of my way of dealing with it is that like he sent me a video that was of I'm blanking on the name. He's some doctor on YouTube that has like at least 1 million subscribers or whatever. And talking about how ivermectin caused like Japan's coronavirus cases to like, plummet or whatever. That was the idea. So I watched the video and I was like, well, I poked the holes in it, like the specific holes. Like you said, okay, well, he's just talking about this was a point where in Japan, it was something like August 2021 that they approved use of ivermectin. And then the cases continue to rise for a little bit, but then it drops off dramatically after that. And I was like, well, that doesn't, that just because that's the point in time where they approved ivermectin, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden everyone started taking ivermectin, right?
Correlation and causation.
And so, and so, and then like,
good one. And what did your father say to that?
Well, he actually said that was a good point. He's a smart guy. He likes to base his, he likes to be at least seemingly logical.
Well, let me ask real fast. Is that doctor on YouTube an actual doctor? Because it's going to be harder for me to believe, and I don't mean this in any offense, but it's going to be hard for me to believe your dad takes value in the source if it's a YouTube doctor and just a YouTube doctor. That would make me very skeptical that he cares about the source.
But there's no shortage of licensed medical professionals who.
No, I just wanted to make sure that like it's not just a YouTube doctor, because then we're on a whole other world of bad standards of evidence, and we need to like that's not going to be you won't be dealing with like the actual content as opposed to like the methods on a meta level that the person employs when they come to know something, right? That's going to be like, at least from my perspective, the thing you'd want to tackle, because you could list anything that somebody disagrees with, but if they just employ really shitty methodology or have really bad standards of evidence, it doesn't matter what topic you talk about. You're just going to have to correct how they come to knowledge in the first place. What's substantiated to them as versus say a methodology like science that has actual like backbone of making that a case.
Sal, you're in a bit of a jam because you're coming from two completely different. You and your father and other members of your family are coming from different starting points when it comes to what information each will accept as reliable. And it sounds like you are doing what the Lord's work, because you took his source and you started poking holes in it. You're going to keep on getting that. As long as you're willing to engage, you're going to have to keep on doing that. But ultimately, you're going to have to address the main issue, which is that your father has access to all of the information that humanity has ever recorded and is available on the internet and other sources, but chooses to toss out certain information because of a reason. And you could find out what that reason is.
A lot of the times, I mean, for everyone, those reasons can be very subconscious and very based on more emotional or beliefs that you already have. So that's why it's so crucial to always ask if you might be wrong, because it's
you're right.
I was willing to consider that this may be some valid evidence, for ivermectin, but I wanted to get to my other points about other confounds that in this data that this study or whatever, that like, that Japan, he even said also in this video that you showed me, the doctor was pointing out that Japan is also they're highly vaccinated. Okay. And then they also are very, obedient when it comes to the masking policies. So they're highly masked and highly vaccinated at the same time. So I'm like, so I pointed out those are confounds, Dad. Those. How can you know that it's the ivermectin when they were already following the vaccine and the masking at the same time, and the Omicron comes along and changes the spread of it, because this was actually data of hospitalizations and deaths. So it wasn't showing numbers of cases. It was hospitalization and death. So I was pointing out that Omicron has been shown to be less percentage of hospitalization and death, and they're already following these guidelines. So I'm just saying that I think it can be useful to be willing to look at evidence that might prove your own theory, that what you already believe, and be willing to be wrong, and but then you can demonstrate to someone else what you're seeing in their own source, basically.
Well, Sal, what did he say about the masks and the vaccines? Just to cut straight to it, what was his response to that? In Japan,
he said that those were good points, but he ultimately, and this is what he always goes back to, I think, when he feels like he doesn't have anything else to say, is that he says it all goes back to he's just mostly concerned with government control and taking away individual rights. And
so that's really, that makes a lot of sense, because like in the sense of like, it's really easy to exploit people's desires or the fact that they think they have control, right? And when you press up against that, I think a lot of it for me, maybe it's not as cut and dry, but a lot of it seems like to me is that people want to feel connected to the world around them in any way possible, and they're willing to just hold on. I think Johnny nailed it pretty, perfectly. Whatever that reason is, they're willing to set, whether maybe it's in some subconscious cases as well, but they want to hold on to that reason, and it only serves to be easily exploitable, in that whenever they see some theory that aligns with those desires, I mean, it's just so much easier to take that over the actual facts, right? It says for a lot of times for people that's just too much work, or maybe not. It's just not in line with their desires, that what they want to believe.
I think to get through to your father, you're going to have to step above the specifics. You're going to have to keep on dealing with the specifics, but you're going to have to start attacking the higher level premises upon which he filters his information. And what would constitute a reliable authority? What would constitute, what were the factors he looks into when he determines whether a source is a reliable source? You might also ask him to allocate percentage points to the plummet, the drop in COVID cases in Japan, or whatever the example is. How much of it is attributable to masks? How much of it is attributable to hydroxychloroquine or whatever? And then ask him, how did you determine it? Did you just throw a number? Did you just pull it out of your butt? Or what was the methodology by which you allocated those points? If he's an intelligent person, he sounds he is. There's plenty of intelligent people who are pulling numbers and ideas out of their asses. Ask him to do that. Once he realizes that he's just finding information that already feeds into his existing beliefs, or things that feed into that, because the thing is, he's getting information about ivermectin from sources who claim to be all about personal freedom and liberty and all these wonderful words that I like too. Personal freedom and liberty and government out of my business, right? They can attach those words to any claim. Like, if you really care about freedom and liberty and children not getting harmed and free speech, and you care about these things, well, then drink your piss. Everyone, drink your piss. If you care about these things, about God and books and literacy, and you can just put those words together, right? And that's what some people are doing. And what the other side is not doing a very good job of is throwing liberty and children and peace and love and, nice flowers, whatever catchphrases they have to do with the vaccine. They're not doing a particularly good job of it. They're relying upon reason and sensibility and sensitivity and social togetherness, but they're not throwing in words like freedom and stuff like that. I find that to be a failing in the messaging being done by the CDC and the powers that be. They need to play that game too, because some people are at this point in their lives mostly swayed by catchphrases.
Yep.
And I'm not saying they have to be untrue, but there is an association being made, and I think your father might be falling prey to it as well. I don't know. What do I know?
Yeah, rhetoric does a lot.
Yeah. But go to that higher level. Keep on doing what you keep on doing what you're doing, and get to that higher level, and go deeper, because it sounds like you have a pretty good relationship. You're able to weather the storm of having these kind of disagreements with your father, and being aware that your father still wants to have these conversations, and insofar as you can handle it. I know people whose mothers and fathers have gone down this road and they can't do it anymore. They just can't. So they're having to write them off as, well, que sera, sera. If they get sick and die, they will. I don't want it to happen, but it will happen.
I was very concerned. He got coronavirus early December, and I think it most likely was Delta. And he got pneumonia. His oxygen levels dropped, and he lives alone. And I was very worried about him. I mean, I had a heart-to-heart with him where I was telling him all my best childhood memories and like, I love you and everything. When I was super worried about him. So it's been really emotionally difficult for me, you know. But yeah,
you're not alone.
I guess I don't want too much time.
No worries, no worries. We appreciate your call, Sal, and let us know if anything changes, and maybe your dad gets over the fence, and I'd love to hear about that, and know it's, you know, one less person that's going to buy into the anti-vax rhetoric, because these numbers really matter in the long run.
Sal, if you have a breakthrough, please call in. Tell us what worked, because there are millions of people having to deal with that right now. So share your successes.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, take care.
All right. Yeah. You too. Thanks.
Jmike, let me say this. There's somebody in here in the chat. I don't want to call you out, but they're saying bumper sticker politics. No, I'm not saying that we should be engaging in bumper sticker politics. I'm saying that what we need to do is recognize that there is a power to rhetoric, and we need to play that game, and we need to sync our rhetoric to the demonstrable evidence, the proof of what actually works. Okay, you can't just sit and pull up your glasses. Well, actually, this is what. No, you have to engage in the whole song and dance to get people to understand. It's great if you're right, but if nobody knows and no one can hear, because some people are primed for certain kinds of messaging types. You need to play those games too, because the other side's playing it, and it's kind of like salty food. Like, we're predisposed toward wanting salty food.
Yeah,
right?
I think science and philosophy are great examples, because in science we'll use something with some analogy or something to try to convey the message that might lose what actually is going on in the phenomena. But the rhetoric will help actually have somebody have a better chance of understanding it, as opposed to a lot of the jargon. I think philosophy is the same way. You could have somebody just immediately go, all right, you said everything logical there, but now I just really hate philosophy, right? As opposed to packaging it in a way where it's like, oh, it makes sense. It's like, look, I just made different mouth sounds, but I still presented the exact same point that we can verify independently. And so, yeah, rhetoric's bad when used to disguise, if you're trying to have information that's not demonstrable and disguise it under rhetoric, sure. But if you can...
You're trying to mislead.
If you can have that path just lead back to the actual independent attestation, there's nothing wrong with packaging something in a way for somebody to understand.